Writing. The sound of metal striking concrete echoed through the luxury car showroom as workers rushed to prepare for the grand launch of Moretti Motors' newest electric vehicle. Cameras, reporters, and investors were expected within hours. Everything had to be perfect. Valeria Moretti, the billionaire owner of the company, walked through the showroom in a tailored black suit. Her sharp eyes caught every flaw. A misplaced banner, a fingerprint on a polished car door, a worker standing still for too long, nothing escaped her attention. People feared her. She had built a business empire from almost nothing and was known for demanding excellence from everyone around her. As she inspected the display area, her gaze suddenly landed on a man crouched beside one of the vehicles. His clothes were stained with grease. His boots were old. His hands were covered with oil. He was carefully adjusting a mechanical component beneath the car. Valeria frowned. She hated having maintenance workers visible during important events. The man stood up after finishing his task and turned toward her. For a brief moment, he simply looked at her. Not rudely, not arrogantly, just quietly, yet something about his gaze irritated her. Perhaps it was because everyone else immediately looked away when she entered a room. This man didn't. What are you staring at? She snapped. The showroom fell silent. Several employees froze. The mechanic blinked. I'm sorry. You heard me. The man looked confused. I was just looking at you. Valeria crossed her arms. Look again and you're fired. The words rang through the showroom. Several managers exchanged nervous glances. The mechanic lowered his eyes. Ma'am, I don't work for you. A few employees struggled not to laugh. Valeria's expression hardened. Then who are you? The man wiped his hands with a cloth. My name is Daniel. That's not what I asked. He smiled faintly. I'm someone who came to keep a promise. Valeria rolled her eyes. I don't have time for riddles. She turned to leave. Then Daniel spoke again. 20 years ago, you promised you'd never forget me. The world stopped. Valeria froze mid-step. Slowly, she turned around. The showroom became eerily quiet. Daniel raised his eyes. This time, she truly looked at him. Not at the grease stains. Not at the worn clothes. At him. The years suddenly disappeared. The shape of his face. His eyes. His smile. A memory buried deep beneath decades of success crashed into her mind. No. She whispered. Daniel nodded gently. Hello, Valeria. Her face turned pale. The billionaire who intimidated ministers, CEOs, and investors suddenly looked like a frightened young woman. Daniel. The name escaped her lips like a ghost. People stared in confusion. Nobody had ever seen Valeria Moretti lose her composure. Yet now she looked unable to breathe. How? Daniel smiled. It's been a long time. 20 years earlier, Valeria had been a poor university student working evenings at a small cafe. Daniel had owned a tiny mechanic shop nearby. They had fallen deeply in love. Everyone believed they would eventually marry. Then everything changed. Valeria received an opportunity to join a startup automotive company. At the same time, Daniel suffered a devastating accident while repairing heavy machinery. When he recovered months later, she was gone. Her family claimed she had moved abroad. His letters were returned unopened. His calls were never answered. Eventually, he stopped trying. But he never forgot her. Neither had she. Valeria stepped closer. Tears began forming in her eyes. I thought you abandoned me. Daniel looked surprised. And I thought you abandoned me. The sentence hit her like a hammer. Years of unanswered questions suddenly returned. What do you mean? Daniel reached into a worn leather bag and removed an envelope. The paper inside had yellowed with age. He handed it to her. Valeria unfolded it carefully. Her hands started shaking. It was one of her letters. A letter she had written 20 years ago. A letter telling Daniel she loved him and was waiting for him. The envelope had never been opened. Her breath caught. What is this? It arrived at my shop 3 months ago. She stared at him. What? The post office found several lost mail containers during a warehouse renovation. Hundreds of old letters were recovered. Valeria could barely process the words. Daniel continued. I received 17 letters from you. Tears rolled down her cheeks. 17. I answered every one. Valeria looked up. I never got them. Daniel nodded slowly. For a long moment neither spoke. The realization was devastating. Neither had abandoned the other. Their messages had simply never arrived. A cruel accident had destroyed 20 years. Valeria sat down heavily in a nearby chair. The room around them seemed distant. The executives and employees quietly slipped away, sensing this moment was deeply personal. Only silence remained. I waited for you, she whispered. Daniel swallowed. So did I. Valeria covered her mouth. All these years she had believed he chose to leave. The pain of that belief had driven her ambition. She buried herself in work. She built companies, earned billions, bought mansions, acquired private jets, yet every achievement felt strangely empty. Now she understood why. The wound had never healed because it had been built on a lie. Daniel sat across from her. I never married. Valeria looked up. Neither did she. The confession lingered between them. Outside, reporters continued arriving for the product launch. Inside, time seemed frozen. Finally, Valeria asked quietly, "Why did you come today?" Daniel hesitated. Then he removed another envelope. This one contained medical documents. Valeria opened them. Her expression immediately changed. The smile disappeared. The color drained from her face. No. Daniel looked away. I'm afraid so. She flipped through the pages. Heart failure. Advanced condition. Limited treatment options. Estimated survival. Less than a year. No, she repeated. Daniel forced a smile. I found the letters 6 months ago. Tears blurred her vision. And I realized I couldn't leave this world without knowing the truth. Valeria shook her head. No, I needed to see you one last time. Her chest tightened painfully. The words felt unbearable. One last time. After losing 20 years. After discovering neither of them had chosen to leave. Now fate wanted to steal the little time they had left. Valeria stood abruptly. No. Daniel looked surprised. No what? No, this is not how this story ends. He laughed softly. You can't negotiate with death, Valeria. A spark returned to her eyes. The same determination that had built a billion-dollar empire. Watch me. For the first time, Daniel laughed genuinely. The sound reminded her of their youth. The sound she thought she would never hear again. Within hours, Valeria had cancelled every meeting for the next month. By the next morning, Daniel had appointments with the best cardiologists in 3 countries. Specialists reviewed his case. Experimental treatments were discussed. Private medical teams were assembled. Daniel protested repeatedly. Valeria ignored every objection. For weeks they spent time together. They visited places they once loved. The old cafe still stood. Though under new ownership, the corner table remained. They sat there for hours sharing memories. Laughing, crying, remembering. For the first time in decades, both felt whole. One evening they walked through a park illuminated by golden sunset. Light. Children played nearby. Birds crossed the sky. Daniel looked at her. You know what's funny? What? If those letters had arrived, our lives would have been completely different. Valeria nodded. Maybe. Do you regret it? She thought carefully. The question deserved honesty. Finally she smiled. I regret the pain. Daniel waited. But I don't regret finding you again. His eyes softened. Neither spoke for several moments. Words seemed unnecessary. Months passed. Against expectations, Daniel's condition stabilized. Then improved. Doctors were cautious but optimistic. The treatment appeared to be working. Valeria refused to celebrate too early. Still, hope returned. 1 year after their reunion, Moretti Motors held another major event. This time, reporters gathered not only for a vehicle launch but for an announcement. The stage lights illuminated the enormous auditorium. Thousands watched. Valeria stepped to the microphone. Beside her stood Daniel. Still a mechanic. Still humble. Still wearing simple clothes despite everything. The audience waited. Valeria smiled. A year ago, I nearly fired this man for looking at me. Laughter spread through the room. Daniel shook his head. She continued. I thought success meant never looking backward. The audience listened carefully. I was wrong. Her voice softened. The most valuable thing I ever lost wasn't money, opportunity, or business. She reached for Daniel's hand. It was time. Silence filled the hall. Tears appeared in many eyes. Valeria looked directly at Daniel. Fortunately, life gave me a second chance. The audience erupted into applause. Not because she was a billionaire. Not because of the company. Not because of the event. But because everyone understood something universal in that moment. Money could buy many things. Power could open many doors. Success could change entire industries. But none of those things mattered as much as the people who truly touched our hearts. As the applause continued, Daniel squeezed Valeria's hand gently. 20 years had been stolen from them. Yet somehow, against all odds, they had found each other again. And this time, neither intended to let go. If you'd like, I can also make it more dramatic, emotional, and YouTube story style with stronger cliffhangers to reach a full 1,400+ words.